Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with you today again, and I hope you've had a chance to listen to the first video that we sent in. This is the second that we are sending in, which is on building quality into proposals. And again, I'm Jo. I head the Independent Evaluation Unit, and it's really a privilege for me to be here with you today. We're going to talk to you about two things that you should think about when you're thinking about proposals that you need to build in right at the beginning. The first one is building good theories of change. And so I'm going to quickly point out a few things that you need to think about when you are thinking about theories of change and building them into your proposals. The second thing that we want you to think about is measuring change caused by the project. And both these things are really important for you to think about because they need to be considered right at the beginning. Indeed, if you start to only think about them, say, in the middle or at the end of the project, it's too late. So, as you think about this, let's go into the first one, which is building good theories of change. And by good, we mean theories of change that actually help you design projects better, help you evaluate projects better. Okay, so I'm going to start with a quick example. Most theories of change are essentially, linear theories of change, and I am presenting this now with a slight caveat that we understand that theories of change can be multi-pathway. They can also have different feedback loops that you need to think about, but just because we want to illustrate what is important in theories of change, I'm going to use a very simple model. Now, many climate programs are like the program that I'm going to discuss very quickly, which is an energy program. So climate programs that are looking at renewable energy technologies, that are looking at adaptation and livelihoods, that are thinking about even building large-scale projects, for example, transportation projects, they all have similar arguments. In the program that I'm laying out, we are thinking about a cook stoves program. Yeah? So the idea is that, yes, you put in efficient cook stoves, and the overall rationale or raison d'etre of the program is that if you install efficient cook stoves, these will help to reduce indoor air pollution, but also help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and therefore improve quality of life. And usually the theory of change, again, with the caveat that this is linear, goes like this. There is an efficient cook stove scheme that is established. The next node is that people use these efficient cook stoves. This in turn leads to a consequence. So notice that there is a node that says that indoor air pollution gets reduced. And simultaneously, there is lesser time and money spent collecting fuel. And the last node is that there are lesser levels or lower levels of greenhouse gas emissions and consequently better health, which leads to then better life. Yeah? So this is a very simple looking theory of change. And there are two things that I want you to take away from this diagram. The first is that there are squares. And these squares are what are called nodes. And then there are arrows. And these arrows connect these squares. Now, let's see what happens in just one of these linkages. And I'm only going to use that to illustrate it. The first step of this theory of change was an efficient cook stove scheme is established. And there is an arrow that leads from that square to people use efficient cook stoves. Very clearly, there are a whole bunch of assumptions that are built into this pathway, and the arrow shows that pathway. The first is that, yes, you have an effective targeting mechanism that is built in. That is, you're targeting the people who are using fuel wood as their source of energy, and they are the ones who are being targeted to then use efficient cook stoves. This, in turn, means that there are further other sub-assumptions that are built into this linkage. First, that those people that you're targeting actually know about the program. Second, that the efficient cook stoves are distributed and distributed to them. So this speaks about the fidelity of the implementation of the program, that the program is being implemented as you planned it. The third is that there is a sufficient incentives for these targeted sections of society to use these cook stoves. Yeah? And importantly into this, if you want to build in sustainability into this linkage, you also are assuming that households are not phasing out the use of these efficient cook stoves as they go along, that they actually like the new cook stoves. So important in all of this is understanding that there are assumptions that are built into this overall pathway that take you from one node to the other. I'm only going to discuss this particular part of the theory of change and then just going to quickly give you a checklist for what is important in building into a theory of change. So a few things for you to consider. First, arrows that you have in theories of change point from cause to effect for every link. Yeah? From the square to the next square, you need to have a causal arrow built in. Second, each arrow reflects only one hypothesized and testable relationship. That is causal. Third, the nodes or the squares in my diagram capture drivers, something that is going to drive the effect or a consequence, something that is a result of that action. So it can be either one, but nodes are not pathways, they're not processes. Nodes are where you either have a driver of a process or a consequence of a process. Fourth, arrows can graphically depict the size of change that you are anticipating. And these can be positive or negative. And I'm happy to explain this perhaps in a bilateral email that you might send to me. The important point is that theories of change can and should also include a reflection of timescale, and this becomes very important for climate change programs especially. The sixth point is that the nodes themselves do not capture the direction of change. You're essentially halting there. You're saying this is a driver or a consequence, but you're not saying that this is a process which has a certain direction. And the second last point is that the impacts that are included in this theory of change are measurable or observable. And this is important because if you want to build evidence into your theory of change, and this is the whole point of giving you this very brief tutorial, you need to ensure that the nodes themselves are well informed and or measurable. So evidence to inform each one of these linkages needs to be included. So that's my first sort of checklist for building a theory of change. The second thing that we want to talk to you today about is measuring change caused by the project that you're building. And again, I want to reiterate that it's really important to build this right from the beginning, because it becomes too late for you to start to think about this at the end of the project. Yeah. When you're thinking about measuring change caused by a project, you have to try and think about how it is easy for you to report to GCF, not just to GCF, as to what the effect that is being caused by the program is or the project is, but also how whether it is easy for GCF to credibly inform the change that you're recording for us. So I'm going to give you an example actually that comes from the region, and a lot of you may have heard of Progressa. Progressa was a conditional cash transfer program that was essentially started in Mexico in 1995, and it was one of those very important programs that built in an impact evaluation right from the beginning. Now, 2 years after Progressa started, and it's a conditional cash transfer program, they did an impact evaluation that helped to then measure the effects. And there were 4 effects that broadly came out in that report 2 years later. The first one was that this conditional cash transfer program that was targeted at vulnerable households in communities was a well-targeted program, so that it was going to households that were vulnerable and were especially needed the cash transfer. Second, that as a consequence of this conditional cash transfer program, school enrollment actually went up by 0.7 of a year, just over a span of 2 years. And this was well measured. It was significant. Third, as a consequence of Progressa, which was a conditional cash transfer program, anthropometric measures, especially of babies, so height at birth and weight at birth, both of those were much better than other kids that were born in the same time. And last but not least, the incidence of illness amongst targeted communities actually went down by 23%. A couple of things are important as I report these results. First, you're seeing that there are magnitudes that are getting reported: 0.7 years, improvement in anthropometric measures, incidence of illness. The second is that I'm actually stating that, yes, this was caused by Progressa, and it wasn't just caused by something else that was happening in these villages at the same time. Yeah? The third thing is that I'm stating this with confidence. All three things are important because they have important bearing on how you are building your projects and designing your projects right from the beginning. And this is what I want to submit to you today. The reason you have all seen evaluations being done over and over again, but as a consequence of this evaluation of Progressa, which was independent and measured these changes, Progressa then ended up being a national program and continues to this day to be a scaled up program that is now available all over Mexico and has been able to transcend political changes as well. This was all a consequence of really high quality evaluations. So what was different with this? Why was this evaluation treated differently compared to all others that are done? And why did policymakers take note? And I want to submit that policymakers took note because an impact evaluation was built in right from the beginning into Progressa. They had an independent agency that came along that helped them to design how they might measure these effects in credible and transparent ways that were also reportable. In Progressa, what they did, just very, very briefly, is that they targeted a sample of 506 eligible communities, and they created an evaluation sample. But because they rolled out the program in a randomized way and in a phased way, and again, we are happy to have discussions with you about these, they created what are called counterfactual communities that help them to measure this change and measure it credibly and independently. These three things were very important in then informing the evaluation that was then undertaken at the end of the program and then helped to change policy. So what I want to tell you is that some questions that we want projects to answer, and I hinted at this in my first video, was all programs should think about measuring and reporting whether it caused a change, whether the change that they are reporting would have happened anyway, even in the absence of the program. And if the program caused the change, is it measuring how much was that change? And last but not least, are there other ways for the program to have delivered that change? Yeah? What we are saying is you should start to think about measuring attributable impact or change, attributable to the project, yeah, that you're building. And you need to start building that from the beginning. So, two key messages today. First, build good theories of change, and we put out a checklist for you to refer to. And second, design to measure change at the beginning. I know these are lots of things that we've given you to think about, but we welcome emails from you. Please write to us at ieu@gcfund.org with the subject line Advice Training. You can also follow us on Twitter. And with that, thank you very much.